Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my weekly podcast. Today, we have a very good friend of mine, Julia Kril, founder and executive director of BAK Agency. Hello, Julia.
Hi, Eugene. It's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming, Julia. And you are now podcasted. Julia, as you are from Ukraine, I would like to ask your opinion about the war there. And I was just reading that Trump is going to he's very close to making a deal with Zelensky, and they are waiting the answer of Putin for a ceasefire. How do you see it?
Yeah, ever since Trump took office, even ever since he was campaigning, he was one of his key points was to promise to stop the war in Ukraine. Originally, he promised to do it in one day. Then he said it's going to take 6 months. But what we are seeing from the Trump administration is a very big effort to pretty much resolve two of the ongoing conflicts that are affecting the whole world. It's the war in the Middle East and the war in Ukraine. So first, Trump made the proposal to the conflict resolution by basically rebuilding Gaza and turning into a high-end resort. And then he also assigned his team to work on Ukraine, which was a very bumpy road. And so yesterday, the American administration and Ukrainian administration met in Saudi Arabia for the full day of negotiations, with an outcome that Ukraine committed to 30-day ceasefire if Russia agrees to that as well. They made a commitment to sign the critical minerals deal, and they made a commitment to work towards a broader and longer term peace agreement. Of course, for Ukraine, what is very important is to make sure that whatever this peace agreement is, that it prevents the future war in Ukraine again, the future aggression of Russia, which is very important for short-term and also long-term period, to avoid and to prevent future generations of Ukrainians to suffer from the Russian aggression. So it really has to be done in a way where US, but also Europe has to put up the security guarantees in Ukraine, because right now Europe is pretty much absent from the negotiations. Hopefully, at the later stages, Europe will also have a seat at the table, but at this moment, we don't see Europe as having that active voice. It's led pretty much by the United States. Um,
Yeah, and
so
here about Europe, I would like to ask you, like, do you see Europe as a weak player in this table, or do you think that Europe is taking its time?
that's a very interesting question. I wouldn't say that Europe is a weak player, because Europe has a much stronger manpower and army. Potentially, it could have a much stronger army. It still has its defense spending. Only last week, Europe committed to 800 billion in defense spending, and Europe does has the resources and the capacity. What Europe doesn't have is that political standing and the political power to take the leading position. So I think that Trump administration is kind of pushing Europe to take a more active role and to take a stronger role. I mean, we and it started with the speech of J.D. Vance at the Munich Security Conference, where for 2 days after his speech, everybody was, "Oh, Europe woke up! It's time for us to wake up." And now, hopefully, in a very short time, soon, Europe will sort of regain its role and start negotiating. UK is already doing this. We see Starmer's actions towards supporting Ukraine, allocating resources to defense in Ukraine, and hopefully Europe will be also a big part at the negotiations table very soon.
Okay. And do you see, I mean, because you said that Europe is going to be soon ready, like faster ready than it's supposed. That many people believe that this is not going to happen. But do you think that this is because of individual countries are interested in stopping the war and creating a more strong Europe, or you think it's the leadership of the European Union, like the European Commission, who has this will?
Um, Probably both right now. I mean, the what we're seeing, the line from the Trump administration is that it's not going to be backing up Europe and it's not going to be supporting Europe. So I think everybody is coming to the understanding that it's time for us to play by our own role, by our own rules. Uh, this morning, Europe retaliated to the U.S. tariffs with tariffs on 26 billion euros in goods for trade. So we are seeing that they are starting to take action to stand up to the United States. So hopefully, the EU leadership will continue on this path. Speaking of the member states, we already see the active role of individual member states to build its own leadership and to stand up for their values. We see that Poland is spending the most of the European countries in defense spending, almost 6% now. We see the leadership of Giorgia Meloni to build those bilateral ties with the US administration. And I think that given this stance from Trump regarding EU, it will be the role of member states to build its own bilateral relations with the US, to have those dialogues, and at the same time to show its leadership. So we will see probably much more work and in the member states, and we will see much more statements coming from individual member states. So in terms of our work, it's probably going to be much more focused on member state engagement.
Okay. And so I think I find it a good thing that Europe is finally waking up and is going to have its own policy and its own army, hopefully, and is going to protect the interests of the European Union, right? Do you agree?
Of course, it's Europe is a huge economy. Europe is a huge territory, and it it is a big player in the world. The regulatory acts that are coming from the European Union are affecting all of their strategic partners, those who want to do business in Europe. So, in order for Europe to don't become isolated and lose talent, lose its people, lose its economic future, it has to start making its own decisions, but the ones that will be focused on the long-term economic growth, that the ones that will be focused on peace also. And I think that sometimes they say that every crisis is an opportunity. So that's what but maybe I'm too optimistic, but I tend to think that this crisis of the relationship between Europe and the US, that it might be an opportunity for Europe to revive itself. I might be too optimistic, but that's what I would love to
I'm
see.
optimistic as well because somewhere I have read that they say that every war is the start of a new development. Like on
Yeah.
every kind, every war in our human history was the start of a development. So let's hope that it's the start of a good development for the European Union. But
I I
yeah, tell
think
me.
that also in Ukraine, it will hopefully it can be start of the new era for Ukraine. Once we find that peace agreement, which is not going to be that perfect desired outcome, but hopefully that would be the new development for Ukraine to take to find resources and partners to ensure economic growth, to also maybe find its politically leader, its role as a political leader, hopefully.
Okay. And I want to ask you one thing because till now we had NATO, we had United States and the European Union, and on the other side we had BRICS.
Hmm.
And let's say that today there is a schisma between the European Union and the United States, and maybe NATO is going also to be divided. Do you see a threat between these three powers, like especially for Europe? Because BRICS is going to have maybe a strong military power, more economic relations than European itself at this moment, and United States separate at this moment.
Well, the only way is for all of these three powers is to work together if they want to stand up to BRICS, but also, the alliance of Russia, China, Iran, North Korea. In order to stand up to them, Europe, United States, UK, they have to be working together. Your enemy is united, so you also have to be united against your enemy. The question will be how European decision for the defense spending will affect American decision to continue investing in NATO.
I see. Okay. Well, let's see. It was just a question. But so let's come to your company, like to BAK agency. You are very active, I think, in both continents, right? Europe and United States.
Right now, currently, primarily Europe. Yes, our work is focused, of course, in Brussels and in some member states, specifically Italy. We are following the transatlantic relations, of course, trying to develop stronger relations with the players in the US, but of course, lobbying in the US is very different than lobbying in Europe.
Yeah. And this is what I wanted to ask, like how easy or how difficult is for you, like a total different administration from Biden and Trump, and the relationship of United States and Europe. How easy and difficult is for you in the same time to work with all these changes?
Well, I would say the biggest challenge is the unpredictability of Trump. And it's just something that it's very difficult to understand what his motives and end goals are, because he might make a statement in two different directions, then pick which one works and stick to that. At the same time, all of these executive orders that he is signing are really creating this environment of uncertainty. And not just for us, but also what I'm seeing is for companies and for businesses, it is the time when they actually have to wait out a little bit and basically see what would be the long-term outcome, because you cannot amend your company strategy from one day to another and then again. So for us, as we are doing consulting, and part of our work is to provide good quality analysis to our clients, we are really struggling to understand what would be the outcomes coming from the Trump administration. Probably for the time being, it might be very chaotic. And then in a couple of months, it might stabilize. That's what we are hoping for. Because what we can understand is Trump's stance on China, on Iran, on North Korea, on Afghanistan. But then he goes and almost proclaims, economic war and relationship war on its strategic partners, on Canada, Mexico, Europe. So you really can't understand what is his end goal. Some people are saying, especially when it comes to the war in Ukraine, that he's repeating the Russian narrative. But at the same time, we do see that he wants to work to find that peace agreement, both in Ukraine and in Gaza, so that eventually he can go to do business. So he
Okay.
can continue working on ensuring that economic growth for America. So it's really right at this moment. It's a bit challenging, but at the same time, we are also looking at how he was working in his first term and sort of drawing the parallel. At the same
Okay.
time, everybody is really shocked right now, but he already had one term in the office where you could clearly see his patterns of behavior.
Okay. So technically, what you are saying now, everybody has to be business minded, like not very diplomatic, but more business. Like Trump
Yeah,
wants business, so let's be business.
yeah, and they are. It looks like companies are really adjusting their positions to be able to keep working with the Trump administration. It
Okay.
looks like, especially when it comes to the diversity programs, everybody is sort of cleaning it up. We see the big tech companies 180 shifting their policies. Now they are very actively lobbying in Europe. And also, Europe is going to respond to these changes coming from the US by hopefully readjusting some of its regulatory acts that have been negatively affecting American business. So there is still a need for those transatlantic relations. So we might see, also we are seeing some reaction in Europe thanks to that, those companies doing their work in Brussels.
Okay. And what would you say about smaller countries that they are trying to lobby, either in the United States, either in the European Union? Is it something because seeing by myself, like as an Albanian, that they say, oh, but Trump has bigger problems today, as you said, Gaza and Ukraine, and nobody's going to take care of you. Is it something that it's really happening that those countries are in a plan B or plan C, or they are still trying to help them and to be part of the bigger image of their policies?
In Europe or in the US?
I would say both. My question would go for both.
Hmm.
Because of course, like Europe, it's a bit, the enlargement is the
Yeah.
biggest problem. But for the United States, it's again policies like we see that yesterday the son of Trump was in Belgrade, NATO chief was in Kosovo. So it's like, what kind of messages are they trying to pass to these countries that they are in the center of the conflict?
Hmm. I haven't followed this news, but I wouldn't discredit, um, I wouldn't discredit the strategic points for both administrations just because there are also big files on the agenda um, that are um, that are taking the news space. At the same time, yes, especially in Europe, we are seeing with some of our clients that it's a bit more challenging to get people's attention and time at this moment, just because the stakes of solving the war in Ukraine are so high. So maybe it's going to take a little bit longer um, to find the response and to refocus. But I wouldn't discredit that the enlargement package is also a priority. I wouldn't discredit all of the other work that needs to be done, both in the European countries and with European strategic partners. There's still we can look. There is still problems. There are still problems in Syria. There is still conflicts happening everywhere around the world, and Europe still needs to keep its partners being its partners, because after the world doesn't stop, you know.
Yeah, life
But
continues and they have to be active.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I would just take that it's also very likely that some part of the work is just happening in the background that are not highlighted in the news. But yeah, I'm pretty sure they know also in the US, the administration is not only one person. There is still strategic priorities and strategic plans that needs to be implemented. It just might take a bit of time.
Okay. And before closing the interview, I would like to come to you personally. How do you combine work and life balance with all these changes that lobby has at the
Yeah.
moment?
Um, yeah, I'm very lucky to have a very good team and to really be able to rely on them. And I believe that you know, you do need a team to build something credible. So uh, it's it's really a very important part of being able to also have work and life balance. I mean, right now I'm going back to Ukraine for a few days, so my colleagues are taking care of the client work for this week, and then next week I'm coming back to the office. So I think it's also important to have, um, the dedication, but remember that you need to take care of your mind, body, and to be able to function longer.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine it's very stressful, and that's why I'm asking, because also me, like when I read the news for Albania, I see that there are many things
Yeah,
changing very fast, so I can imagine for me that I am just seeing it from outside. Seeing you being in the inside is like 10 times harder. And
yeah.
yeah, from
Frankly, I mean, at the moment, we are not working specifically on the Ukrainian file. It's something that we follow because it's, of course, will affect our work. It's my home country. It's something that's the key priority right now in Europe. But after the meeting between President Zelensky and President Trump, um, in the White House the week after, reading the news was very challenging. It's something that, my whole community in Ukraine was really affected by. Um, I was speaking to my family. They also couldn't really bring themselves together to read the news because it's something that, comes as a shock. Um, but I'm really hopeful. I remain hopeful that they will reach the peace agreement soon. Uh, that will have this long-lasting effect, because on the future of Ukraine might determine the future of Europe and the future of the US. So it's really crucial to find the right agreement.
For sure. For sure. I also believe that if this war ends, we are going to benefit more than losing, because already we feel the difficulties after 3 years of war in our economy and our daily life. So I think it's a good moment for everybody to come to an agreement and help redevelop Ukraine, Europe, and why not United States.
No,
Well,
of course, of course.
Yulia, I would like to thank you for coming to my podcast. It was very nice to have you here. And for everybody who wants to have lobby services, please do contact Yulia, and she will be very helpful. I'm sure of it, in your mission.
Thank you, Eugene. It was such a pleasure, and I'm very happy to see you having this podcast every week and having so many exciting guests. So, thank you also for having me. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you everyone for watching my podcast. Follow us on our social media and see you next week. Goodbye.